what is this thing called a SWPP, a Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan? It is very importantly a site-specific written document. So this document will identify the potential sources of pollutants to your stormwater that are discharging from outfalls on your facility. Describe the control measures that you intend to use to reduce or eliminate those pollutants from getting into the stormwater and discharging from your facility. And then it identifies the procedures and other sort of requirements that are spelled out in the permit. The 2003 permit loosely covered some of these items, but never really specifically called out for a stormwater pollution prevention plan. That said, you may have some of the pieces in your stormwater management plan or you in other sorts of documents. So you may not be starting from totally ground zero. Just to kind of clear things up, again, that alphabet soup, SWPPs are not your SWMP, your stormwater management plan, and SWPPs are not your SPCC plan, your spill prevention and control and countermeasure plan. Although there is a great deal of overlap. So when you're writing your SWPP, you might want to have all those documents kind of around you to cut and paste and use things as you can. Do you need one? If you have a maintenance garage, a transfer station, a public works garage, or any other facility that does waste handling, you need a SWPP for that facility. Good news is if you have all of those on the same piece of property, you only need one document. You do not need a SWPP if you already have one. But if you have developed a SWPP for your multi-sector general permit, you obviously do not need to recreate it. You already have it. If you got a no exposure certificate from the MSGP, you don't need one. And if you also have, if the discharges from your facility are authorized by a separate NPDES permit, you don't need to do a SWPP. When do you need to prepare one by? This is your due date, 2 years from the effective date of the permit. So July 1st, 2019, mark your calendars now. There is a whole lot of resources already out there, particularly something that was developed by the Central Mass Regional Stormwater Coalition. They've put together a template for a SWPP prepared under the requirements or those loose requirements of the 2003 general permit. We'll talk more of the specifics later, but great resource, great starting point. Good news on the SWPP is that they seem to have all of the requirements for the SWPP pretty concisely placed within the general permit. You don't have to flip around. They are on page 50 to 54 of the general permit. So you can dog-ear those pages and use them as needed when you're developing your SWPP. Again, what's in your SWPP? You need a pollution prevention team. Who is going to be in charge of developing, implementing, and revising your SWPP as needed? You're going to need some names and titles, and those are going to change over time. Again, this is one of those supposed to be living, breathing documents. Most of them end up being dust catchers, but try and make it living and breathing, so update those names as needed. In the SWPP, you're going to need a description of your facility and identify the potential pollutant sources. So pretty much saying you're going to need a map. Okay, what do you have? Where do you have it? Where are you doing things? Where are your outfalls? Where are your floor drains? What are your receiving waters? All that fun stuff. And like I said, describe your activities and your potential pollutants associated with those activities. You're going to have to identify your stormwater controls. What are you going to do to prevent or reduce the discharge of pollutants from your system? And what are you going to do, reasonable steps, quote unquote, to address the quality of discharges that may not originate on your site? So if you have run-on from another site, what are you going to do to make sure that that run-on does not get dirty and that run-on, if it is dirty, does not leave your site in that dirty state? So reasonable steps. If you are discharging to a water quality limited water, again, it's something that has a TMDL, you're going to have to do a little bit extra to make sure that those pollutants of concern are addressed. What are your management practices on the site? What are you going to do to minimize and prevent exposure? As much as possible, you're going to want to locate your activities and your storage where you don't have any interaction with stormwater. I know that's easier said than done. There's a lot of big toys played with in DPW yards, and it's not usually very easy to cover them all up. So do the best you can to protect and cover what you can. Another management practice is good housekeeping. I always like to say this is keeping your mother on your shoulder. Keep a clean house, pick up after yourself, prevent making a mess, In this case, you want to sweep your paved areas at a regular frequency. I love when the permit says things like a regular frequency, so that's annual, whatever it makes sense for you, that you don't have a muddy mess coming off your property. You want to make sure all your trash containers are closed. That's a big thing, and it's an easy thing to do. And no brainer here, don't store your leaky equipment or vehicles outside. Preventative maintenance, you want to inspect all of your equipment and your systems quarterly. That's a permit requirement. So another thing to have in your SWPPP is those sorts of timelines. Pollution, spill prevention and response. First, you want to prevent the spill. Do everything you can to prevent the spill. Don't leave buckets of oil by the end of a garage bay where it can easily get backed over. Store things on secondary containment. Just be wise about what you're storing and how you're storing it. And then the response portion, what are you going to do if you do have a spill? How are you going to respond to it? Do you have spill kits? Who are you calling? All those things, so no one looks at a big puddle on the ground and goes, eh. So you have a plan of attack. And then, like I said, who do you call? More management, erosion and sediment control. A lot of DPW facilities will have exposed areas of sorts. Just seems to be what happens. You always kind of have some dirt open somewhere. You just want to do a good job of making sure that dirt doesn't get off-site. So whether that's silt fence, hay bales, anything to keep it from tracking off-site, that's what you want to do. Management of runoff, you want to prevent or reduce the pollutants by diverting, containing, reusing. If you can keep the dirty water on site, great. That's pretty much what that's saying. Here's something that's probably going to affect a lot of you and could be a big money item. Salt storage and salt sand storage. The EPA has now said that you have to have it covered, either under roof or under tarp within 2 years. So July 2019, you've got to figure out something to enclose or cover your salt and sand, anything with salt in it. Employee training has always been a portion of the MS4 permit. It's always been a requirement. You want to make sure you train those that have the ability to pollute stormwater. So anyone that is doing an activity that could interact with stormwater, whether that's spreading salt in the winter, doing your catch basin cleaning, your sweeping in the summer, or anyone on that pollution prevention team really needs to get some training. EPA recommends annual. Maintenance of control measures. If you have a BMP on site, like there is here that we'll see later, if you don't maintain it and it turns into a big muddy mess, it's not doing its job, it's not doing any good. So you have to inspect those and you have to maintain them to make sure that they're working properly. Speaking of inspection, you're going to have procedures in the SWPPP for how you're going to do your site inspections. Really, that's having a good checklist of what you're going to look at, when you're going to look at it, how you're going to look at it. You want to inspect all areas that are exposed to stormwater and all your control measures at least quarterly, and one of them has to be during a rain event. If something is not working, if something needs repair, you should do that as soon as possible. Don't let it sit there not functioning. As soon as you see it, kind of deal with it or have a plan to deal with it. Your SWPPP is going to need to be signed. It has to be signed by the principal executive officer or ranking elected official, or that person can designate someone else to sign on their behalf. And the good thing I see is that you can delegate by title. So you don't have to delegate it to John Smith, you can delegate it to the DPW director, thereby eliminating the need to have to update that name over time. So I think was pretty nice of them to let you do it that way. The keys to a SWPPP are record keeping. Kevin talked about this earlier. Inspections, maintenance, training. Whether it's paper, whether it's fancy on a computer, however it works, just keep your records because you're going to need them. And they need to be either in hard copy or electric, anything electronic. So on a computer somewhere or in actual milk crates. The biggest mistake I see is that the records are not kept on site. And that's an easy thing for a regulator to say when they come on site is let me see your records. And if you have nothing to produce, it's an easy kind of tick against you. So you have to have those records on site. Like I said, this is a living, breathing document. You're going to need to revise it over time. Things that are going to trigger a revision are when you have new pollution prevention team members, when the facility changes structurally, where you change where your activities are happening. Anything, when you change the map, it's going to be, anytime you have to pencil in on that map, it's time to change the stormwater pollution prevention plan. Another time you'll need to revise if it's just not working. If your control measures are not doing enough to keep the muddy water from leaving the site. You have to think of something different. You have to beef up what you have. Or when the state or EPA makes you change it. So I'm not going to go through all this, but these are some of the pertinent items within the Stormwater Management Plan template that was prepared by the Central Mass Coalition. Again, this is just a resource for you to grab when you are preparing that SWP. It has great forms and sheets that you can just pull out and tweak as necessary and take them in the field with you. This is me. Feel free to give me a call. Happy to help. I've prepared many of these, and good luck to you all.